Throughout history, man has always engaged in war. Despite a desire for peace, many states and people continue to resort to armed conflict, leading too often to death and suffering. Henri Dunant, a true pioneer of modern humanitarian work, transformed a wildly ambitious dream into reality. To uphold a measure of humanity in armed conflict by persuading states to sign up to the First Geneva Convention in 1864. Today, and for the past half-century, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement has continued the visionary work of Dunant. To protect and assist the civilian and military victims of armed conflict and internal violence. This is the mission of the ICRC. To visit prisoners of war and civilian detainees. To trace people reported missing. To re-establish family links. To provide water, food, healthcare, and shelter. To spread knowledge of humanitarian law and to ensure it is applied. Since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, the neutral and independent humanitarian work of the ICRC has faced new challenges. The task is colossal. The path, chaotic. But the commitment and motivation of the teams are there for all to see. Whatever the situation, it's necessary to act quickly and to make the right choices. Over the last 3 years, wars and natural disaster have affected millions of people across the world. What has been the response? To show the work of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, we've chosen 7 contexts. The conflict in Darfur, the war in Iraq, Nepal, Yemen, the tsunami in Southeast Asia, the situation in Chechnya, and the earthquake in Pakistan. Since the start of the conflict in Darfur in 2003, more than 1 million people have had to leave their homes and their way of life and settle in temporary camps. In order to help the victims, the ICRC, together with the Sudanese Red Crescent and numerous national societies, has launched a massive aid operation. Faced with enormous logistical difficulties on the ground, they've had to find new ways of reaching the most isolated rural communities.
No, actually, once that we have a room like this, clean, we don't find that this is too primitive. I guess it's all relative. But the thing is that in some areas, we will have to take our own tent, and then we may find that it's a very hot day, and it's extremely uncomfortable to be working in that environment. These patients cannot be transferred from here because of political, military conditions and circumstances. So if they don't get the attention on the spot, they get no attention whatsoever.
In Darfur, the persistent fighting and looting has shattered the economy and disrupted local farming. In order to limit the number of people displaced in the camps, the ICRC tries to help the villagers on the ground. It provides seeds and agricultural tools, as well as veterinary care for their animals, and sets up watering holes for their livestock. For without camels and cattle, what are the chances of these rural communities surviving? The war in Iraq has gone on for 3 long years. The humanitarian situation is critical, and the fate of the civilian population continues to get worse. Their needs are growing, particularly in the field of healthcare. But it's more and more difficult and dangerous to work in Iraq.
You know, if one accident happens, one person is killed, one operator, everybody goes, and the station is down. And this produces half of the water for Baghdad.
Vache Arslanian, logistics coordinator for the ICRC, was killed in crossfire on the 8th of April 2003 in Baghdad.
We were extremely shocked by the death of our colleague Vache, above all because he'd been working all day for the medical and water and habitat teams, mostly loading generators and water packs. I myself had left an hour before the tragedy. He was still loading the generators in order to send them next day to Medical City. Seeing that he had worked so hard that day and losing him so tragically was a big shock to the whole team and, of course, to our Iraqi colleagues.
Since the start of the war in 2003, the ICRC has lost 5 co-workers.
I think it's important to stress and to underline that the ICRC has been directly targeted in Iraq on several opportunities. I'm referring, of course, first of the bombing of the ICRC delegation in October 2003, as well as other direct attacks against ICRC personnel. Our priority nowadays in Iraq is definitely to continue what we call our protection activities. More concretely, it means that we are continuing our visit of persons deprived of their freedom, as well as also developing different means in order to reestablish, to reestablish family links between a person deprived of their freedom and their relatives, their families, whether in Iraq or abroad.
Although forced to scale back its operations, the ICRC has decided to remain in Iraq. Its willingness to face the daily challenges on the ground has been strengthened by the active presence of the Iraqi Red Crescent, with whom the ICRC works in various parts of the country. The armed conflict in Nepal has lasted for 9 years and has already cost the lives of more than 10,000 Nepalese. The fighting between government forces and the Communist Party of the Nepalese Maoists has hit local people hard. The priority for the ICRC is to carry out its protection activities, in particular visiting those detained as a result of the conflict. These visits allow the delegates to assess the treatment and conditions of detention of the prisoners. At the same time, they also enable the detainees to maintain links with their families. These family links are secured by the Nepalese Red Cross, which has a countrywide network. Based in Pokhara, the second biggest town in the country, this representative of the Nepalese Red Cross regularly travels several hours by motorbike to deliver a Red Cross message. This is often the only link between those detained and their families.
So have to go. See you next time. Namaste.
In Yemen, the ICRC is also active in re-establishing family links and ensuring that Red Cross messages are delivered to those Yemenis separated from their loved ones. The Yemeni Red Crescent plays an essential role in forwarding messages from Yemeni families who have relatives interned in Guantanamo Bay, in Cuba. Since January 2002, the ICRC has regularly visited Guantanamo, where nearly 500 people of 40 different nationalities are interned. The internees' problems and the problem of the legal framework which should apply to them is a constant subject for discussion with the American authorities.
وأشتي إن شاء الله بإذن الله الله سبحانه وتعالى يعني أشتي من الله سبحانه وتعالى إنه يفرج عنهم قريبا عاقلا غير عاقل أشتي يفرج عنهم بأسرع ما يمكن أنا مشتاق لابني أنا زعلان كثير ليش هناك وهناك عايش هناك بجوانتنامو منشان كذا يعني طول عمري حزينة أبكي.
Who does not remember the 26th of December 2004? On that day, the tsunami devastated the shores of Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, and other countries in the Indian Ocean.
I have never seen anything like it. All those dead bodies in the streets. There is nothing that I could compare it with. Nothing. Nothing at all.
The final death toll will probably never be known, but it is estimated that some 230,000 people died or disappeared, while 2 million people were displaced. This catastrophe led to an impressive show of international solidarity. Immediately, the International Federation, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and the many national Red Cross and Red Crescent societies went into action. Already operating in Aceh in the north of Indonesia and in eastern Sri Lanka due to internal conflicts, the ICRC was the driving force in those two areas affected by the tidal wave during the emergency phase. In Aceh, the Indonesian Red Cross operated first and foremost with teams of young people trained for emergencies. During the first 2 weeks, these teams evacuated thousands of survivors and collected nearly 20,000 bodies. Today, the Red Cross is heavily involved in reconstruction. Its top priority is to help people rebuild their lives after the shock of the tsunami. Aid and reconstruction projects in the fields of health and sanitation are run by community groups and local associations, starting with the Sri Lankan Red Cross. And they aim to gradually build up the confidence of the local people. Supplying clean drinking water depends largely on the ability to decontaminate the wells. At least 3,000 wells contaminated by debris and salt water have been cleaned up by the ICRC and the Sri Lankan Red Cross teams. The resources that have been committed so far are enormous, but much more time and patience will be needed before life can return to normal. Over the past 10 years, 2 conflicts have caused bloodshed in Chechnya, where insecurity continues to reign. Civilians are paying a heavy price as the situation deteriorates, and the chronic cycle of arrests and disappearances drives many families into despair. Without sufficient guarantees to carry out its work in accordance with standard procedures, the ICRC suspended its visits, which are currently under discussion with the Russian authorities. The ICRC helps the most vulnerable in cooperation with the Russian Red Cross, which plays a major humanitarian role in the Northern Caucasus.
Хотелось бы, конечно, для многодетной семьи побольше хотелось бы. Все равно дети есть дети, их кормить надо каждый день, как говорится, каждый час.
In such chaos, every humanitarian act sends a signal of hope. On the 8th of October 2005, an extremely powerful earthquake hit Kashmir, a region already suffering from several armed conflicts. The death toll speaks for itself. At least 65,000 dead, 75,000 injured, and 3 million homeless. In the hundreds of towns and villages, the catastrophe has decimated communities, particularly the younger generation, which was at school at the time of the earthquake. No family was spared. For those left behind, honoring the dead is a way of restoring dignity to their lives. Faced with the disaster, the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement were in a race against time to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. Hospitals and clinics were set up at lightning speed. Many lives were saved thanks to the helicopters that ferried medical teams to isolated villages. Tents, building materials, and food were also supplied, in addition to medical care.
This is an exceptional situation for the ICRC, you know, especially when you compare with what's happened during wartime, because here we had hundreds and thousands and injured people in the same times, and scattered in a huge area.
With its partners, the ICRC has already helped more than 200,000 people and will continue its efforts in the long term. The aid workers of today are carrying on in the spirit shown by Henri Dunant at Solferino. Every day and throughout the world, they carry on their humanitarian work. It takes different forms according to the particular, often complex situation. But every action is driven by the same sense of commitment. Through its neutrality and independent humanitarian action, the International Committee of the Red Cross helps those most in need to restore their lives and their sense of hope and dignity.